Thank you for hanging on. It's middle of the afternoon. I'm sure we're starting to dip a little bit, but don't worry, hang on. Happy hour is almost there. We'll make it. I'm excited to talk to you today about imposter syndrome. It's something that I've experienced myself in the past. I've had a lot of discussions with people about this where I work at the arcade. And I want to share some of the information and some of the knowledge I've had about this with you. My name is Marcus Grambau, as Liam said. I'm the creator of my own, founder of my own studio, Melbourne Games. I've been pretty heavily involved in the Melbourne Games community now for about the last year. As I mentioned, working out of the arcade, I've been fortunate enough to pick the brains of some of Australia's best developers. And today I'd like to share with you some of the wisdom that I've picked up from them and have a discussion with you today. So we're discussing what imposter syndrome is, some ways it can manifest itself, and some emotional tools you can hopefully use to overcome some of the feelings and some of the effects that it can give you to help you to survive in the games industry. While the focus of the talk will be directly on imposter syndrome, a lot of the things we discuss are just general sort of emotional tools to help you, help anybody really in a situation of feeling overwhelmed or out of place. Now before I begin, who here has heard of imposter syndrome? Most of you, awesome, thank you. That's great. So for those of you who have heard of it, hopefully you walk away today with a deeper understanding. For those who haven't heard of it, don't worry, we're going to cover everything that we can in half an hour anyway. So it's been reported to affect up to 70% of people throughout the course of their professional careers. It leads to a host of unfortunate side effects, including anxiety, loss of productiveness, and some others that we'll talk about later on. It's something that I mentioned before I've experienced personally myself. I continually experience this on and off. Most recently, I experienced this about a week ago when Liam asked me to give this talk. Yes, nailed that joke. Awesome, thank you. So yes, I'd like to think that I'm pretty well positioned to talk about this today. So, what is imposter syndrome? Actually, you know what? I'm going to move away from this. Cool. So all these people really seem to have it together, and I still have no idea what's going on. Who's felt this before? Cool. Who's felt this a little bit today, maybe even? Yeah. Awesome. The definition, essentially, one of the definitions is a psychological phenomenon in which people are unable to internalize their accomplishments. Despite external evidence of their competence, those with this syndrome remain convinced that they are frauds and do not deserve the success that they have achieved. So this can kind of extend to just feeling like you're a fraud, like you don't belong. The thought that maybe one of these days people will realize I don't know as much as they think that I do. So if you felt this way, you're certainly not alone. As you can see already from, if you look around the audience, everyone's sort of had some sort of experience with this. Meryl Streep had a similar feeling. I mean, these feelings really kind of permeate creative industries. So, you know, why would anyone want to see me again in a movie? I don't know how to act anyway, so why am I even doing this? You know, Meryl Streep, she's won 9 Golden Globes. She's been nominated for 29, which is a record. And she still feels this way. Excuse me. I still feel sometimes, this is bad positioning, that I like to be as good as so-and-so actor. I see some other actors work and I think I'll never get there, I wish I could. And this is Tom fucking Hanks. It's surprising that he would feel this way. I've got this gorgeous puppy here. He doesn't know what he's doing either, but he doesn't seem to care as much. As I said, you know, I've talked about this a lot with people at the arcade and other people in industry. When I was given this talk, I kind of went out and asked like 30 people that day, have you felt this way and in which ways have you felt it? And the response was overwhelmingly that probably like 80-90% of people felt this way. And everywhere from people who are starting the industry to people who are industry professionals, all the way up to Tony, who runs the arcade himself. He was even open about his feelings with this too. So it was really eye-opening for me. Most recently, I felt this way during my trip to GDC this year in March. For those of you who don't know, GDC is a large convention where they bring over everyone, all the industry professionals. 30,000 people were there, the best of the best, and I felt like, what the hell am I doing here? I was a little bit overwhelmed. I felt completely out of my depth, and I didn't really feel worthy of being there. But the way I dealt with that personally at the time was, okay, well, look, maybe in a way I'm right. I don't know as much as these people. There are some people who have been in the industry for like 20 years. I'm not expected to know as much as them. So the way I dealt with that was basically lowering the expectations of myself and saying, look, just get through it. Just survive, you'll come out the other side. And whatever I'm going through is just a natural part of the learning and development process. So, we've talked a little bit about the generalities. So what are some specific signs of imposter syndrome? Self-doubt, sense of incompetence, frequently comparing yourself to others, low self-esteem, feeling of fear or anxiety, hard to accept praise and compliments, and the inability to internalize accomplishments. This last one in particular can lead into a lot of downplaying your own successes. So, for example, you may be blaming luck or timing for your success. So, we were released at a particular time, we were just lucky, it was around Christmas, we got a lot of downloads, or, a YouTube streamer picked this up, we were just fortunate. That's one of the ways. You can also say, okay, well, look, it wasn't as difficult as we thought. We used some existing code, it was a pretty easy project. Finding as many ways as you can, excuse me, to try to pass this, move the responsibility of success onto something else. Received help from others is a big one, which is interesting because nobody who's successful has gotten there alone. You need help from people. It's really a necessary part of the process. So, charm and likability. People just like me. I'm personable. Got connections, perhaps, or he's my drinking buddy, whatever it might be. Which may be a factor in success for sure, but it's a skill to start with. Social skills is something that is important in this industry, like any other industry. But don't go passing it off on just that, because it's not just that. And a host of other creative excuses. I don't know, horoscopes or something maybe. Some of the side effects, so some of the things you may feel if you're going through the effects of imposter syndrome. So holding back, you may not try to do that prototype that you need to do, or write that design doc or that level design. You might not want to expose yourself for that reason. Procrastination obviously is a huge one. Putting things off through fear of, again, once again, exposing yourself to this. The longer you put things off, usually the harder they become, obviously. So that's not what you want to do. We're going to touch on, by the way, at the end of this talk, we're going to focus a lot more about some concrete techniques you can use. Not finishing projects is a huge one. So a lot of times people who have feelings of imposter syndrome have become kind of acutely aware of how much knowledge that they lack, but that's often through exposing themselves to these larger concepts. So, you can't really get imposter syndrome when you're just sitting at home playing video games every night and not doing anything. Like, you're not going to be challenging yourself. You're not going to have these feelings. So a lot of times you might start the project and you think, actually, shit, this is a lot harder than I thought it was going to be. I didn't foresee these challenges, and people often do drop out. Self-sabotage is pretty evident, pretty obvious. Working hard to make up for ineptness. This is a bit of a weird one. You think, okay, well, working hard's a good thing. It actually can perpetuate this cycle, because oftentimes people who have these feelings of imposter syndrome The hardest workers are the overachievers, and then so they work harder to try and cover up these areas they think they're deficient in, but then the harder work just gets them even more accolades, and they get even more of a positive response, and that kind of fuels that cycle. So why you feel this way? Why would you? What are you doing to feel this way? Like I said before, it is often an exposure to a greater world. So comparison with your peers is a big one. For an event like today, for example, I'm sure you're chatting with a lot of people. Yeah, basically just sort of unfair comparisons with people, which we'll talk a bit more about later on. Exposure to a larger community. Once again, it's along a similar vein. This is an interesting one. You might be a minority in that community. So, for example, if you're a female in a male-dominated industry, if you're an ethnic minority, you might feel like you're the representative for your entire community. And that's an unfair responsibility to place on yourself. So this can also this can also result in feelings that are on line with imposter syndrome. Exploration of new concepts. So once again, learning new things. I've taken the challenge to, okay, I don't know much about, I don't know, shaders, we'll say. So I'm going to go out and learn as much as I can about shaders. Holy shit, there's a lot to know about shaders, and I'm scared now. This is pretty common. And culture as well. There's a big thing in Australian culture that we tend to downplay our successes. It's almost inherent in our nature. It doesn't really serve us particularly well. Like, we might see it as charming, but then, like our American counterparts, they kind of probably see it more as professional suicide. So try not to do this as best you can. I do it myself. I'm a victim of this myself. I feel like it's just something you need to try and avoid, and we'll discuss it more a bit later on as well. As I said, most of those things you'll notice are basically opening yourself up to be ridiculed, I should say. They're an exposure to external stimuli, and this is because imposter syndrome does not occur in a vacuum. As indicated in the opening opening quote, those with certainty are often incompetent, and those who are brave enough to see how far the rabbit hole goes are often smart enough to be scared. So, it can be sometimes just the first step into a larger world. So it can be good. It can be a good sign that you're traveling in the right direction, that you're heading towards the correct place. Okay, so we are running a bit behind today, so I'm happy to actually just go ahead and we'll discuss some of the ways that you can deal with this if you're feeling it or some of the emotions of imposter syndrome. So the first thing today is sort of what we've done already, remembering you're not alone. As you can see, everyone kind of shares that to some degree. And just knowing that it's not just you can help alleviate some of those symptoms. Own your successes. This is a big one. This is sort of by definition what imposter syndrome is about. But you didn't get lucky by chance. You worked hard. Larry Bird is one of my favorite basketball players. He said, the harder I work, the luckier I get. And it's true that you put the work in, so do the best to take ownership for these successes, because you have to live with the responsibility of your failures too, right? So do the same for your victories. Minimizing these serves nobody. Cease comparisons. They're always subjective, they're often biased, and they're rarely helpful. Social media really only amplifies this notion. You go on Facebook or Twitter or whatever, you only ever see the best of what people are doing. You only ever see the highlight reel. You don't see the making of. And as individuals, we're acutely aware of how hard we're working to keep our head above water, and you just assume that sometimes people are just cruising along, but no, everyone feels this. And just make sure you don't compare your weaknesses to their strengths, because that's what you do a lot of times, particularly, like I said, through social media. Being wrong doesn't make you a fake. Don't be afraid to fail. I mean, we could do a whole talk about failure, but it's part of the process. It's part of growing. The best developers make unsuccessful games. The best basketball players miss more shots than they make. Losing is part of it. It's part of the process. And fucking up does not define you, okay? Excuse me, embrace the upside. As we mentioned, it can be a sign of growth, that you're moving in the right direction. You'd rather be the kind of person who is ambitious, yet feels somewhat overwhelmed than someone who's incompetent but self-assured. It's a sign you're challenging yourself. Try to separate what's real and what's in your own head. This is difficult because by definition, everything we experience is framed by our own perception. But do your best to be objective. Try and pull yourself out of it. Consider perhaps it's just in your head. A lot of times, what's a 2-hour movie to you is just a 15-minute infomercial for somebody else. So keep that in mind. No one really knows what they're doing. This is interesting. You know, the longer I'm in the industry, the more I'm realizing that everyone's just kind of making this shit up as they go along. For sure, like, you know, having more experience than somebody, proper processes, good company culture, existing code base, all that kind of stuff, it's going to help you down the road. But the most experienced developers experience things every day that they don't know what to do with, challenges that they haven't come across before. So it's not uncommon. You've got to find a way to find the answer, and if you don't know, find somebody else that can or can help you. And keep that in mind when you face your next hurdle. Mantras. So these are a little bit cheesy, but you know, much like a game engine, the human brain can be programmed through language and reinforcement. So positive affirmations, they wouldn't go astray. You know, something simple is good. My personal mantra for today was, you can do this, or... it's cheesy, but make sure, just try it. If you haven't tried it before, just try it. You might find that it helps you. Again, it's cheesy, but the truth is that it starts with you. And finally, help someone else conquer their own imposter syndrome. So, you know, this is the point where I've been feeling this today, and you've all helped me. And I hope that in some way, you know, I've helped you as well. But you've all been unwitting participants, I suppose, in my own personal therapy. So thank you for that. And yeah, just to wrap this up, I'm not worried about you all. I'm confident you'll be fine. And how do I know that? Well, who am I to say that? Well, you're here. You didn't have to be here. It's a Sunday. But you took the time. You know, you could have spent $100 on a ticket on Overwatch instead. You could be at home playing that right now. But instead you're here, and you're doing your best to absorb as much as you can. And that's really important. Success is the sum of small efforts. And today is a step in the right direction. So life has its ups and downs. You just have to do your best to weather the storm, lean into it, and hopefully, you know, you'll come out the other side. Thank you very much. Cheers.